Good morning, students. In today's class, we will be learning about learned helplessness and key learning processes which takes place in classical and operant conditioning. So, before the break, in our previous class, we have learned about classical conditioning and operant conditioning, and also the determinants of operant conditioning and classical conditioning. We have also learned about the differences between classical and operant conditioning. And in today's class, we will be continuing with operant conditioning and classical conditioning, but we will be specifically learning about some key processes which takes place in classical and operant conditioning both. Okay, so let us start with the class. So check box 6.2, learned helplessness. So learned helplessness is an interesting phenomenon. So it results because of the interaction between two forms of conditioning, that is your operant conditioning and classical conditioning. So how we will be studying how it is an interaction between these two conditioning, and why it is known as learned helplessness. Okay, so but also remember that learned helplessness is one of the underlying psychological factors of depression. Okay, Seligman and Meyer demonstrated this phenomenon in a study on dogs. Okay, so first what they did is that they subjected dogs to the sound, that is your conditioned stimulus, and electric shock, that is your unconditioned stimulus, using classical conditioning procedure. Okay, so first these dogs were subjected to classical conditioning process. Okay, so in classical conditioning we know that the animal they cannot do anything. Okay, they do not have the power to do anything. So what happened was that the animal had no scope to escape or avoid the shock. So this pairing was repeated a number of times. We all know that in classical conditioning, it's not in the hand of the animal, the one which we are performing the experiment on, it's on our hands. Okay, so whatever experiment we do, we have the control. So the animal had no scope to escape or avoid the shock. This pairing was repeated a number of times. Okay, so the sound the dogs heard the sound, and then the electric shock. After that they were given electric shock. Then the dogs were subjected to a shock in operant conditioning procedure. So this classical conditioning happened. It was the sound and the electric shock were paired, and then the dogs were subjected to shock in an operant conditioning procedure. But in operant conditioning we know that the one that we are experimenting on, they also have the power to respond. Okay, so they are responsible for their own consequences. But what happened here, the dogs could escape the shock by pressing their heads against the wall. So they could do that, but after having experienced inescapable shock in the Pavlovian contingency, the dog failed to escape or avoid shock in the operant conditioning procedure. So because of classical conditioning, they thought that okay, we cannot escape it, this is meant to happen. So in a condition, in operant conditioning, where they had a way to escape the shock, then also they didn't try it at all. Okay, they didn't try to escape it. The dog just suffered the shock through and did not attempt to escape. This behavior of the dog was called learned helplessness, because the dog thought that okay, there is no way out, we are going to get the shock, and I am going to get the shock anyway. So even when there was a scope to escape, the dog simply didn't do anything. Okay, so it happens to us humans also. If I have failed in 4 consecutive examinations, even after trying, then probably the fifth number of time we are not even going to study, because we will think that I am anyway going to fail. Okay, so this happens to us humans a lot. You think about examples in your real life. We say like we always keep saying that I have given up, I have tried so many times and I cannot try anymore. So this is learned helplessness. Okay, this is one of the major reasons, underlying reasons for depression. So learned helplessness is often measured in terms of the subject's ability and persistence before they give up the task. Continuous failure leads to little persistence and poor performance. This shows helplessness. There are numerous studies that demonstrate that persistent depression is often caused by learned helplessness. Okay, so persistent depression is caused by learned helplessness. We already think it that we have tried enough and we cannot try it anymore. We accept our failure before we try it. So that is your learned helplessness. Okay, so this is a very important phenomenon. So please remember this. Now let us look at some key learning processes which happens in classical and operant conditioning both. So these include reinforcement, extinction or non-occurrence of learned response, generalization of learning to other stimuli under some specifiable conditions, discrimination between reinforcing and non-reinforcing stimuli, and spontaneous recovery. So we will be learning these one by one. Okay, so first let us start with reinforcement. So we already know what reinforcement is, but again we will be repeating it. So reinforcement is what? It is the operation of administering a reinforcer by the experimenter. Okay, so in these experiment, the Pavlovian experiment and the other operant conditioning experiment, the food was the reinforcer. Okay, so reinforcers are stimuli that increase the rate or probability of the responses that precede. So now for example, if a child scores well in his or her examination, then you give the child praises, chocolates or some other gifts. And to score well in the examination, a child has to study, right? So what will happen is that when the child is given some form of reinforcement, that is your food or praises, then what happens? Then the child will study more to score well in the examination. That is the response. Okay, that is the response which precedes the reinforcer. So we know that reinforced responses increase in rate while non-reinforced responses decrease in rate. So if the child is given reinforcement in the form of food, praises, other gifts, so the child is going to study more. It will increase the rate of the response. But if the child is not given any sort of praise, nothing, then again the child will get discouraged and probably he or she is not going to study or perform well in the examination. It is going to decrease the rate. Okay, and as we all know that a positive reinforcer increases the rate of response that precedes its presentation. So it has to be positive in order to increase the rate of the response. So after scoring well in the examination, food, praise, gifts, all these are positive reinforcers. So if these positive reinforcers are given, then only the response of studying more for an examination will increase. Okay, in case of negative reinforcers, suppose a child keeps on biting his nails. So every time he bites his nails, he on that particular day, probably his parents won't give him his favorite food to eat. Okay, so that will act like a negative reinforcer, and then slowly and gradually that particular behavior of nail biting will also go away. So negative reinforcer increase the rate of the response that precedes their removal or termination. So biting of nail precedes the negative reinforcer, like not giving the favorite food to eat. Okay, so what will happen then? This particular behavior will get removed or will get terminated because of negative reinforcer. Okay, now let's look at what a primary reinforcer is. So a primary reinforcer is biologically important since it determines the organism's survival, that is food for a hungry organism. So we all need food. Okay, this is our basic physiological need, so it is known as your primary reinforcer. And then now, what are secondary reinforcer? So secondary reinforcer is one which has acquired characteristics of the reinforcer because of the organism's experience with the environment. We frequently use money, praise and grades as reinforcers, and these are secondary reinforcers. Food is your primary reinforcer because food is a biological need. We have to eat food. We cannot survive without food. Then money, praise and grades are your secondary reinforcers. Okay, so systematic use of reinforcers can lead to desired response. So if we want a particular response, whether we want to remove a particular behavior or we want to reinforce some other positive behavior, we use reinforcements. Okay, now coming to extinction. So extinction means disappearance of a learned response due to removal of reinforcement from the situation in which the response used to occur. If the occurrence of conditioned stimulus and conditioned response is not followed by the unconditioned stimulus in classical conditioning, or liver pressing is no more followed by food pellets in the Skinner box, the learned behavior will gradually be weakened and ultimately disappear. So suppose in the classical conditioning experiment or the operant conditioning experiment, what happened is that after a particular response, food was being presented. Okay, in classical conditioning, the responses were paired. Okay, so the ring of the bell, whenever the dog heard the ring of the bell, the dog will salivate and then the food was presented. Okay, and in operant conditioning, the liver pressing, when the rat pressed the liver, then food was presented. So what will happen if the food is not presented in both the cases? Will the dog salivate and will the rat press the liver? No. So this particular response is going to extinct if that particular if the reinforcement, that is food, is not presented. Okay, so that particular response will also gradually be weakened or it will disappear, because if you are not getting the food, then how will the dog salivate, or why will the rat press the liver, right? So learning shows resistance to extinction. It means that even though the learned response is now not reinforced, it would continue to occur for some times. But when learning happens, even if that particular thing is not presented, then also that learned if that particular thing is not presented, as in the learned response is even if it is not reinforced now, then also it will continue to occur for some times. Okay, so there will be resistance to extinction. Okay, so now for example, let's take the rat experiment only in operant conditioning. So suppose in 10 number of trials, the rat is given food after it presses the liver. Then what will happen, even if later on in the 11th trial, 12th trial or 13th trial, even if the food is not being presented to the rat, then also the rat is going to show that particular behavior of pressing the lever, because the rat has learned that particular behavior. Okay, that rat has learned this to respond this particular way. So learning happens here. Okay, and then learning shows resistance to extinction. So even if the reinforcement is not presented, it is not reinforced, the particular behavior is still shown. Okay, so this is your resistance to extinction, and it happens because of the process of learning. Okay, so now if we take some real life example also, a child is always given praises, rewards whenever he or she scores well in the examination. But later on in his or her life, even if the child doesn't get some sort of reward, then also that particular behavior will be shown by the child. He or she will still be studying. Okay, because learning happens here. So this is your resistance to extinction. Okay, so resistance to extinction happens even if the particular response is not reinforced later on. Okay, reinforcement in every acquisition trial makes the learned response to be less resistant to extinction. In contrast, intermittent or partial reinforcement during acquisition trials makes a learned response more resistant to extinction. Okay, so always remember that you go and check what is intermittent or partial reinforcement. We have already talked about it. So intermittent or partial reinforcement during the trials, remember the experiment, makes a learned response more resistant to extinction. Okay, so now in the next slide we will be learning about generalization and discrimination. The process of generalization and discrimination occur in all kinds of learning. However, they have been extensively investigated in the context of conditioning. So now let us take an example and then understand what is generalization and what is discrimination. Okay, so suppose an organism is conditioned to elicit a conditioned response, that is saliva secretion. Okay, let's take this first example of classical conditioning only. So suppose the dog is conditioned to elicit a conditioned response, that is saliva secretion, on presentation of a conditioned stimulus, that is sound of bell. So what happens after conditioning is established and another stimulus similar to the conditioned stimulus, that is ringing of the telephone. So ringing of the telephone is similar to sound of bell is presented. The organism makes the conditioned response to it. This phenomenon of responding similarly to similar stimuli is known as generalization. So now in this dog experiment, the dog hears the sound of the bell and the dog starts salivating, thinking that the food will be presented to the dog. But instead the sound of the bell is presented. Maybe the ringing of telephone is presented. Okay, so in that case also the dog will start salivating because the ringing of the telephone is similar to the sound of the bell. Okay, so the dog will generalize. Okay, so this phenomenon of responding similarly to similar stimuli is known as generalization. So now take us another example. Suppose a child has learned the location of a jar of a certain size and shape in which sweets are kept. Even when the child's mother is not around, the child finds the jar and obtains the sweets. This is a learned operant. Okay, it is a learned response. Now the sweets are kept in another jar of a different size and shape at a different location in the kitchen. In the absence of the mother, the child locates the jar and obtains the sweets. This is also an example of generalization. When a learned response occurs or is elicited by a new stimulus, it is called generalization. Okay, so in this case also, in the case of the child, the mother used to locate the sweets in a different jar, okay, in a different location in the kitchen, but then she changes the jar and she keeps in a different location in the kitchen, but then also the child will be able to locate the new jar and will be able to eat the sweets. So both here the jars, obviously one jar is similar to another jar, so again it is kept in the kitchen, so the stimuli here are again similar. Okay, so what happens, this process is known as generalization. When a learned response occurs or is elicited by a new stimulus, it is called generalization. So it is kept in the new jar, but again it is also able to elicit the same kind of response from the child. Okay, so this process is known as your generalization. So another process which is complementary to generalization is called discrimination. So generalization is due to similarity, while discrimination is a response due to difference. So now let us take an example. Suppose a child is conditioned to be afraid of a person with long mustache and wearing black clothes. In subsequent situation, when he or she meets another person dressed in black clothes with a beard, the child shows signs of fear. This fear is generalized, okay, because his parents have told him that people who look like this are scary. So when he sees a person dressed in black clothes, then the child will start generalizing. Okay, but again, on the other hand, if he or she meets another stranger who is wearing grey clothes and is clean shaven, the child shows no fear. This is an example of discrimination. So because the child has been told that someone who has long mustache and is shabbily dressed or something, then if the child meets someone wearing black clothes with long beard, then the child will generalize. But on the other hand, if the child sees someone clean shaven wearing white or grey clothes which is different from black clothes, then the child will show no signs of fear, because the child will start thinking that I am safe from this person. Okay, so here discrimination will happen. Okay, occurrence of generalization means failure of discrimination. So here the child is able to discriminate. Okay, and if the child is not able to discriminate, then generalization will happen. Okay, so discriminative response depends on the discrimination capacity or discrimination learning of the organism. So some people are better at discriminating things and some people are not. Even I will give you one real life example. For example, colors. Okay, some people are able to discriminate between colors very well. Okay, this is cherry red, or this is blood red, or this is another kind of red. But some people would just put them in, all of them in just one category. Okay, so they are not able to discriminate, but some people are very good at discriminating. Okay, other people generalize things. Okay, so you can take examples from your real life only. So now in the next slide we will be learning about spontaneous recovery.